Hello, this is Tom, aka Gedeon here for Tabletop Tap Room, and we are doing the Gygaxian distribution of magic items. It is a formula that I'm going to suggest. Now, if you have a different formula, that's fine. Maybe you've got a different formula from a product, a GURPS product written by Steve Jackson that you like to use. What I'm going to be doing is dissecting the Gygaxian distribution of magic items in an introductory adventure. And I think these numbers that I'm going to present actually hold fairly true without actually doing the research of looking at 20 different modules from back in the day. Maybe that should be a follow-up to this, but looking at basically a distribution of magic items, the breakdown that Gary, as a game designer, presented in a microcosm of the Dungeons & Dragons game. And by that, I'm going to say we are looking at Keep on the Borderlands. I was looking at Keep on the Borderlands, and I noticed something odd. There were some magic items that don't appear in the basic rulebook. So you got the box set of Moldvay Basic, which came with a bundled module, and there were magic items in this that were not in the rulebook. And if that's all you had, that you would have been like, scratch, scratch, scratch. What's going on? And it wasn't necessarily a problem because there's no +1 spear in the list of the small list of weapons and armor. It's +1 hand axe, +1 dagger, +1 mace. It transitions into armor. +1 spear is not really that big of a big hairy deal, right? You can just, there's no +1 polearm, but I need this NPC to have a polearm, so we're going to make it a magical polearm +1. Done. Easy peasy. That was not the problem, but there were some other little more creative things, and I went looking them up, and I said, that's interesting. I wonder how many are in here. And then that led to this whole deep dive into charting all the magic items and Keep on the Borderlands. Now, Moldvay Basic is, when I say this is a good microcosm, because you've got the basic rules, it just covers levels 1 through 3. It's a very short, concise list of magic items. Between Moldvay and Keep on the Borderlands, it's a nice little microcosm for doing this breakdown. In fact, when you read the foreword for the Moldvay Basic, written by Tom Moldvay, you see that he considers what he did to be editing the original game. And he still considers the original game to be the best. But he said it was written with gamers in mind. And over the years, the half dozen years since it came out in the 70s, there's been hundreds and hundreds, if nay, even maybe thousands of questions that the staff at TSR has fielded. So it's helped to point us in the direction of what maybe needed to be cleared up. So he really viewed the basic game that he was putting together as making the game more accessible to the novice, to the non-gamer, because they were all war gamers back then that were introduced to this new RPG, Dungeons and Dragons. And so he really considers this an editing of the original material and a cleanup, with the benefit of all those questions that have been fielded by the staff at TSR. So that makes this little project a nice little microcosm of D&D. Because certainly if we were trying to do this with AD&D, we're talking some massive lists of magic items to really break down and analyze the distribution of magic items. And it might actually break the system that we're trying to identify here. If we went to AD&D, it might be a little bit more finicky and hinky and a little more breaky of the systems. What I'm going to propose is a formula for what you would consider to sprinkle magic items into an adventure you're writing. So what I'm going to propose is a formula from Gary, because Gary wrote Keep on the Borderlands. And he certainly had, his fingerprints are in the Moldvay Basic because it's an editing of material he helped produce. And so that's why I consider this a microcosm, that we can just examine this and it'll give us something. It's very manageable for us to dissect this. So let's get to it. But before I go too deep, let me just say thanks for watching the video. Thanks to my subscribers. You guys are great. And don't forget that like, subscribe, and bell icon. And help me build the channel. Leave a comment. It's good for the algorithm. Appreciate it. I was looking at Keep on the Borderlands, and I noticed as I was prepping some stuff, there were some non-standard magic items, in fact, that were not in the Moldvay Basic rulebook. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? So it made me wonder, how many might there actually be? Because, Gygaxian wrote Keep on the Borderlands. I mean, Moldvay was the editor for Basic. I wondered how many non-standard magic items not in the rules that Gary interspersed in here. And it wasn't that many, and they were mostly at the end of the module. I mentioned the +1 spear. It's in the hands of the Minotaur, but that's easily hand wave. You have an NPC or a monster, and you roll up a +1 hand axe, and you say, I think that's stupid. I think the Minotaur would have a spear. It's +1 spear, just like that. So that's easy. But also in the Temple of Evil, a lot of the skeletons and zombies were wearing amulets of protection against turning, which basically made them, you had to turn them as if they were one step higher, one grade higher of undead. So skeletons were turned as zombies, zombies were turned as ghouls. And so you had all of these minion monsters in the Shrine of Evil wearing these amulets. And it was just kind of a, let's make this more of a challenge. Let's slow your roll, Mr. Cleric, who's already reached 3rd level. And you're going to have you're going to snap your fingers and just turn all these skeletons on us. No. You're going to work for this. You're going to have to fight some of these. So I think that's what the idea of that magic item. Those magic items were not intended for the players to use, although enterprising players might be like, knock, 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 hello, Mr. Vampire. I've got all of these amulets of proof against turning. You want to buy one? It's like the guy on the corner opens his coat and he's got all the watches that he's pickpocketed off people hanging inside the coat. You need a watch? So something that players might surprise you and be like, yeah, no, hey, let's sell these to that vampire. I bet he might want to have them. He's got some undead minions. You might want to put these on his undead minions. He might want to wear one himself. They're not intended for the players to use, but they could be used. The Medusa, who's in a jail cell in the Shrine of Evil, she has a potion of turning stone to flesh. So three sips. So 3 people who have been turned to stone can be unturned to stone, can be reverted back to flesh. Non-standard's not in the basic. I don't even know if it's in the expert. I frankly just didn't look. I should have, right? But it's non-standard. And then there was an amulet of protection from good. Again, it's not Moldvay, but it has. I think it's in there on purpose because I think it interacts, it intersects with another magic item in a certain way. And I think Gary might have actually planned that. So we'll discuss that. So this is we're going to call this the inspired. It's by no means inspired. It's just what Tom Moldvay happened to put. What he happened to think was a good distribution of magic items with these percentages. So when you're going to the treasure tables and you're rolling, and then all right, we have a magic item. the other table we rolled on said, all right, 15% chance of a magic item. We roll. We have one magic item. We now have to figure out what it's going to be. We roll on this table. So this table gives us some percentages for what they thought was a good distribution of magic items back then. 20% swords, 20% weapons and armor, 25% potions. So 1/4 of all magic items found should be potions. Scrolls, 20%. Ring, 5%. Rings are kind of powerful. I do agree with that 5% on rings. Wands, staff, and rods, 5%. And a magic, miscellaneous magic, the fun stuff, the elven cloak and boots, the rope of climbing, flying carpets, that kind of thing is 5%. So these were the percentages. Now, these are, if we dive into this list a little bit, between potions at 25%, scrolls at 20%, and wands, staff, and rods, which have charges, at 5%, 50% of all the magic items the characters find should be consumables, the toilet paper of magic items, if you will. You use it up, and you're done. The other interesting thing when you dig into this list, because one of the things I noticed on the list was that there are some cursed items. For instance, on the list of swords here, we have a -1 cursed sword. You have a cursed scroll. You have a potion of poison. You have the cursed armor showing up on the weapons and armor here. Armor class 9, looks like +1 armor. That's a bad one. And the other negative thing on here was the helmet of alignment change. So these are the screw with the player character items. So in looking at all of these items, I did some number crunching, and between the swords, armor, scrolls, potions of poison, ring of weakness, I forgot that one, and a helm of alignment change, 11% of this list is cursed items. So that gave us another number. 50% of the magic items in an adventure should be consumables. 10%, let's say 10%, should be 1/10 should be your cursed items, the negative items that the players don't necessarily want to find. So if you find everything and keep on the Borderlands, outside of the keep, because the keep's a special cases, the strategic environment where the players go to rest up, resupply, get rumors, and plan to go back into the wilderness again. The keep has magic items, and it's a curated list. There's the Castellan. He's got +1 armor, +1 shield, +2 sword. And he's got some potions back in a trunk in his room. And then here's the captain of the guard, and he's got +1 armor, +1 shield, +2 sword. And he's got some other potions back in his, sock drawer. Here's the chaplain of the chapel, and he's got +1 armor, +1 ring of protection, and a snake staff. Here is, the corporal of the guard. He's got +1 armor and a +1 sword. So it's kind of that. So it's very much hand-picked items. So I say the keep is a curated list. Whereas when you look at this list, I highlighted everything that turned up in the wild. 33 items, and it's a nice distribution. It has the appearance of being random. There's a little bit of duplication, but we see here that Gary's percentages for what he chose for strictly just in the wild, excluding the keep, 6% were swords, 24% were weapons and armor, 30% were potions, 15% were scrolls, 3% were rings, 12% were wands, rods, and staffs, and 8 to 9% were miscellaneous, depending on how you count that entry for elven cloak and boots, because it's just the elven boots, not the elven cloak. So either you just count that as one, or you count it as a half. And so it'll be 8% if you count it as half, and it'll be 9% if you count it as just a solid one. So that is the percentages. So Gary's consumables in this adventure are 48%, very close to 50. But I did not include 6 plus 1 arrows. So if you do include 6 plus 1 arrows, you're right at 50%. And then he included 2 potions of poison, a cursed sword -1, what else? The helmet of alignment change. So that worked out to be 12% were cursed in this adventure. So again, we're close to that 10% that we had already established. And he spread out the whole list without a lot of variety. With a lot of variety and little duplication. Now, the duplication actually comes in. When you look at it here, you get like protection from undead. Protection from undead, that's really targeted at that climatic portion of the adventure in the Shrine of Evil. Potions of healing, there were 4 potions of healing. That's kind of a gimme. There's always going to be combat, so you're going to give away a lot of potions of healing. You're going to artificially bump it up. Where you do get duplications, you could almost say it's targeted towards the climax. And I think that with your 48-50% consumables, having some of them be, all right, I'm putting this in there with an eye to thinking if the players find it, if they find it, not guaranteed they will, but if they do find it, this could aid them with that, but you never know. They might not use it for the climax. They might do something off the wall, and you'd be like, yeah, you can try it. Sure, you can try that. So with the consumables, you do have some of the duplication is within the consumables, and I think that's a very valid thing to do. And interestingly, you had items that clearly were not intended for the players to use. I think I mentioned the amulets of protection from turning the undead are wearing. Clearly, it's a magic item. Players can't use it. You could certainly bring it to the chapel, and the priest would be like, "Oh, thank you. These must be destroyed. You've done a great service." So there's a use there for them, but they cannot be used classically as a magic item. The Amulet of Protection of Good, it's presumed the players are going to be on the side of good, operating on the side of good, so they can't use that, but you have a Helmet of Alignment change, which is one of those items that's there for screwing with the player characters. And we're talking a 3-point alignment system in Basic, right? So 3-point alignment system, you start out good, you can end up neutral or chaos. Or you start out law, you could end up neutral or chaos. Or if you start out neutral, you could end up law or chaos. I think chaos is more fun. So you now have a member of the party who's on the side of evil. That's the side we're fighting. Well, if they put on the Helmet of Alignment change and their alignment's been changed, they might be able to use that Amulet of Protection for Good. Give me that amulet. I'm going to wear that bad boy. I now have a +1 when I'm fighting against the good aligned, the law, people on the side of law. You might even say it even applies to the neutral, because they happen to be fighting on the side of good in trying to take down this temple. So suddenly, this negative cursed item has a creative way that it allows the players to use something they shouldn't have been able to use. And I think that's kind of cool. And I don't know, but I wonder if Gary planned that. And certainly that would be something you could plan, that type of thing where normally this is a screw with you item, but the presence of this other thing means that this could actually end up being a good thing. If the players think of it, they could turn this to be a good thing. And I think those kinds of things should be written into adventures, particularly an OSR style of adventure. Absolutely. So the formula is It seems to hold true from Gary and from Tom Moldvay. It's 50% consumables, 10% negative or cursed, and 40% cool stuff. Could cool stuff be targeted at the climax of the adventure? Yes, maybe, possibly. I would be careful with that because consumables, they get used and they're gone. So if you are sprinkling in extras in the consumables, you're going to get used up and they're going to disappear from the character sheet, and that's fine. But if it's permanent magic, you want to be a little more careful with that. Now, there's one other percentage that we need to talk about, and it's not in addition to 50, 10, 40. It's a 10% that applies to all of that, to that 100% total of magic items. And there were new items that I didn't include in that 33 when I was doing the percentages. Those non-standard items that do not appear in Moldvay Basic. Non-standard new items that the rules lawyers in the group will have never seen because you assume they've got the rule book, they probably read it, they know what the items are. So, oh, you find some magic boots. They're going to be, oh, I put them on. Okay. You find a potion. I'm going to be careful checking this out because it could be poison. We got to be careful. But if they're magic boots, I'll just put them on. Because we're playing Moldvay Basic, elven boots. They got to be elven boots. I'll take the risk. So I do want to put 10%. The percentage worked out to be close to, where did I do the number? I think it's like 11 or 12% of the non-standard items were not in the rule book. And so, if you've got a resource like this is a Vault of Magic. It's written for 5e. I'm famous for hating on 5e quite a bit, but I bought it just because it's just a book of magic items, just a full hardcover book of magic items. And I figured I could read some of these, and if I liked them, I could just steal them and modify them a little bit and put them into the version of D&D that I like to play. So I got this, and I believe I got a copy for my stepson when that came out. You go to other editions of D&D for non-standard magic items, and you got to have a use for that 4th edition rulebook that you bought and never really played, right? Why not? Go and find other non-standard items. The players are not going to know if they've been reading the rulebook. That will be unusual, be much more wondrous because they've never seen it. Oh, this is interesting. Or, maybe even in some of your old Middle Earth role-playing products from Iron Crown Enterprises. Every once in a while I'd find something and they'd be like, oh, that was really cool. I gotta remember that. I thought that was a cool item. Just put them in. So 10% of whatever you do put in should be non-standard stuff outside of the rule book. Stuff you made up. Or you put a different wrinkle on it. So those are the numbers: 50% consumable, 10% curse negative, 40% cool stuff / permanent, and then 10% of the overall total, whatever it is non-standard, comes from other sources that the players are just not going to recognize. Now, my one complaint about what Gary did. Now, he put 33 magic items out there. There by no means is it guaranteed the players are going to find every single one of those magic items. Okay? It's not guaranteed. But there's 33 of them out there. That seemed to be a good number. It seemed to not be unbalancing for this adventure and for this game. My one complaint, and I know there are other criticisms you could possibly level against Keep on the Borderlands, like, oh, it's a monster hotel. All these monsters close together when some of them should be fighting each other. Putting that aside, we're just talking magic items. So my one criticism is the +2 sword. You got 6% swords, +2 sword, and a -1 curse sword. I would have thought you would have gotten a +1 sword, not a +2 sword. Gary went straight to +2. Now, to be sure, any player finding a +2 sword is going to love it. They're going to be happy to have it. They're going to love putting that on their character sheet, and they'll use it, and they'll be happy to use it. I just feel like it was the point where I almost wanted to accuse Gary of doing Monty Hall. Just, hey, behind door. You want behind door number 1, or do you want behind door number 2? You can have this potion of healing, or you can have what's behind door number 3. Giving away a +2 sword. I would have thought, all right, you want to give away a special sword? Well, how about one of those +1 swords that's +3 against undead? Because then that's usable in the climax of the adventure, in the Shrine of Evil. So, a +1 sword with +3 versus undead, and maybe a paragraph of backstory. Give it a name, give it a paragraph of backstory. And when I say paragraph, I do mean like 2 or 3 sentences at most. Don't go crazy. Honestly, when we read The Hobbit, and they find the 2 swords in the troll horde. Oh, this is Glamdring, and this is whatever the thing. And this name translates Foehammer. This name translates Goblin Cleaver. And these were created by the Elves of Old for the Gondolin in the wars. That's it. That's the backstory. And yet they're cool. It's not pages of backstory. It's just a paragraph. And they're cool. And that adds cool factors. So let's do that here. For example, they find a sword, and it was forged by the High Elves of Old. And its name is Aramathalassi, which literally translates from Elvish as End of Spirits. But in the common tongue, it is called Death Cleaver. +1 sword, +3 against undead, and it cannot be wielded by anyone of chaos or evil alignment. Remember, 3-point alignment system. And if wielded by somebody of good or law aligned, it will 1 time a day do a healing surge of its wielder for 1d4 hit points. But this is cool. It's got a name, Death Cleaver. I carry Death Cleaver. And it's cool. It's got a name. It's forged by the High Elves of Old. We don't know what that means. We just kind of throw it in there. It's something the players could go and investigate if they care. Maybe they don't. It's a plot thread that could be picked up later in the game. Who cares? It's just there. This is a cool sword. Alternately, it could be a warhammer. Because I did notice a lot of these magic items in that list were items that could benefit a cleric. So let's imagine maybe it's a warhammer, and it's called Soul Hammer. It's got the Elvish name or whatever, but it's called Soul Hammer. +1 weapon, +3 versus undead, and 1 time a day in the hands of a good aligned cleric. It allows them to cast Cure Light Wounds. Cool. Soul Hammer. That's a cool sounding weapon. Or alternately, this weapon is an undead slayer. It's got a name. Death Cleaver still works. +1, +3 versus undead, but it does double damage to undead, and after it slays 100 undead, it vanishes. Legend says that it will reappear in a temple, awaiting the day for the undead to threaten the population, and the high priest will bestow it upon a new warrior of good to go out and smite the undead. Cool sword again. Certainly something that would be a benefit to the players in that climax. Not going to hang around forever, because after and it's going to have some undead on it, so it's not fulfilled its mission. It was given to a warrior, that warrior died, and it's now in this treasure hoard with these monsters, and so you roll D100, and let's say you came up with 43, so it's killed 43 undead. You've got another, 57 more, and it will do double damage too. And if you crit, and that's double damage, well, then you double the double damage. I would be fine with that. So, it's this sword, and, and all of a sudden they'll be fighting, like you, the game master, will know it's getting down. Like, if they don't research it, they'll never find out about that slaying quality. Its mission is to slay 100 undead. And so they're going up against Strahd, and they're fighting some low-level wight or skeleton, and it's on 99, and they kill a skeleton with it. Oops, sword vanishes. Sword just vanished. We still got to fight the vampire. Damn it, this is a problem. So that also then potentially goes under screwing with the player characters, and I'm okay with that. So these are three different versions of a +1 sword that you can get. It's kind of special instead of that +2 sword. And for God's sakes, if you're gonna give the +2 sword, give it a name and a paragraph backstory. Make it something interesting. This was forged by the dwarves of such and such, and it was to fight the goblins, and it's fight the mountain ogres, so it's ogre cleaver or whatever. And that's what I would do. That is my one criticism, that he gave that +2 sword. I don't think he should have given it. So this is my formula, my Gygaxian formula. 33 magic items given. To be sure, when you add everything in the keep, you're bumping it up to about 40 to 50 magic items available in this whole module. I exclude the keep because most parties don't murder hobo, and if they do murder hobo, there should be consequences. As a game master, you should enforce some consequences, like a whole army is raised to come and kill them. They're murder hoboing, the king doesn't like it. There should be those kinds of consequences. And the keep really is supposed to be a strategic environment where they rest up and resupply. And so those magic items are just there as a curated list because they make sense that these individuals would have these items. They're not meant to be treasure for the players. So about 33 items in an introductory adventure. Maybe I should start breaking open other modules and chart this many magic items in this module. Here's the distribution of them: 50% consumables, 20% cursed, maybe some module. I think it'll be 10 or less. I think most modules will have just 10 or less of cursed items. Just off of my impression of having played back in the day, I don't think we included a lot of cursed items in the adventures we wrote, but we certainly did include. I always put plenty of healing potions in adventures I wrote, just because it kept us going. Oh, you got to this point and you find some healing potions. Oh, we better use those now. We're out of cure light wounds. So I always put plenty of the healing potions available for the players when I wrote adventures. And I certainly did handcraft certain things, thinking this might be used in the big bad, the big climax of the adventure. So, yeah, you can do some of that. I would be careful doing too much of it, especially among the cool stuff. Sure, you do want to have a cool sword that's got a name and a backstory. Just makes it cool. And, and the player might hang on to that sword far longer, even though they can upgrade to a +2 sword. Do you want the Soul Cleaver, which is only a +1? But yeah, I carry Soul Cleaver. Or do you want the +2 sword? No, I'll stay with Soul. I'll stay with Soul Cleaver, even though it's +1. I don't care. It's a cool sword, and it's seen me through a lot of battles. And I still have a bone to pick with Strahd, so I'm going to use this on Strahd. Maybe. Who knows? But definitely, I think this is the Gygaxian formula. 50% consumable, 10% curse, poison, negative, and 40% cool stuff. And then another of all of that, 10% should be non-standard the players have never seen. Something you found from another source, from another game completely. You just converted it over. Just to keep the rules lawyers, guessing. Because that's the non-standard items that are not in the rules. Players don't know what they are, and the curse, poison, negative stuff, that keeps them guessing. That forces them to slow their roll. Let's not be so quick to use this. Let's go research. Let's look into this. Maybe we can get a magic user to identify this for us. That is what we want to encourage in the game. It's a very OSR concept. Maybe with 5e, that's just not how 5e should roll. But in a Gygaxian OSR formula, I think this works. And where I'm going to label it the Gygaxian magic distribution formula. Just made that up. This is Tom for Tabletop Taproom. Thanks for watching the video. I think I went a little long, but thanks to my subscribers. You guys are great, and keep on gaming.